The morning air in Vermont was crisp with the smell of pine and the promise of freedom. Emily Carter stood outside her family's modest home, her camper van parked in the gravel driveway, its doors wide open like the wings of a bird ready to take flight. Her father, Tom, helped her load the last of her things: camera equipment, a sleeping bag, a stack of road maps folded with care. Her mother, Linda, clutched a thermos and a bag of snacks, eyes glistening with a mix of pride and worry. The family dog, Max, paced nervously around Emily's boots, sensing something was about to change. Emily was glowing with anticipation. She had planned this trip for months, mapping out every national park she wanted to see, every quirky roadside stop, every sunset she hoped to capture. At 27, with a degree in journalism and a passion for storytelling, she had turned down a newsroom job to pursue something different. Something raw. She called it, the Unfiltered America Project, a solo journey to document the people and forgotten towns scattered across the vast landscape of the country. She wore a faded denim jacket, patches stitched into the sleeves, and a leather notebook always tucked under her arm. Her vlog camera hung from a strap around her neck, ready to capture every mile. Her younger sister, Hannah, stood beside her, arms crossed but eyes soft. "You better actually text," she said, trying to mask the emotion in her voice. "I will. Every night," Emily promised, pulling her into a tight hug. Then she turned to her parents. Her dad tried to smile, but his brow stayed furrowed. Her mom reached for her face, cupping it gently. "Just trust your gut. If something feels wrong, don't wait around to find out why." Emily nodded solemnly. She climbed into the driver's seat, gave one last wave, and with a sputter of the ignition, the van rumbled to life. As she drove off down the tree-lined road, the camera mounted on her dash recorded her singing to herself, sun beaming through the windshield. It was the beginning of something extraordinary, and the last time her family would ever see her in person. Emily parked her van along the edge of a quiet overlook in the New Mexico desert. The sky stretched endlessly above her in a blaze of orange and purple, the sun dipping behind the jagged mountains. The wind whispered through dry brush and tall cacti, carrying with it a strange silence. She climbed onto the roof of her van, camera in hand, and began filming. Her voice was calm, cheerful even, as she talked about the day's journey, how she had stumbled across an abandoned diner off Route 54, how she'd met a kind old couple selling turquoise jewelry by the roadside. But then her tone shifted, just slightly. "So, something weird happened earlier," she said, adjusting the camera. "I was at this tiny gas station outside Vaughan. Middle of nowhere. And this guy, mid-40s maybe, long beard, trucker hat, he just kind of stood there watching me. Didn't say anything. Didn't buy gas. Just stared. I smiled, and he didn't smile back. Gave me the creeps." She forced a laugh, but her eyes flicked nervously toward the darkening desert. "I'm probably being dramatic." She panned the camera around, showing the desolate landscape, the van, the sky. Then she turned it off. Later that night, she sat inside the van, eating peanut butter from a jar with a spoon, wrapped in a flannel blanket. Her journal lay open beside her, pages filled with small, neat handwriting. She stared at her phone, debating whether to send a message. Finally, she typed, "Something feels off tonight. Think I picked the wrong place to park. I'll explain when I get to El Paso." She hit send to Hannah, her sister. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the van. Shadows danced across the rocky ground as clouds covered the moon. Emily reached over, locked the doors, and drew the curtains. She listened, first to the wind, then to the sound of her own breathing. In the silence, she thought she heard footsteps on gravel. She grabbed her camera but didn't film. The message she sent would be the last anyone received from her. The next morning, her phone went silent forever. 3 weeks had passed since Emily's last message. Her family's worry had turned into full-blown panic. Calls went unanswered. Her GPS location hadn't updated. The vlogs stopped uploading. Friends tried to reassure her parents, saying maybe she was off-grid, filming somewhere remote, but Linda and Tom knew something was wrong. Emily never went more than a day without checking in. By the end of the 3rd week, her father filed a missing person report across state lines, begging law enforcement to treat it seriously. A multi-jurisdictional search was launched, but the desert was vast and cruel. Then, a break came from an unexpected place. A park ranger near the Texas-New Mexico border noticed a dusty, older model camper van parked oddly close to the Rio Grande, tucked beneath a bluff, barely visible from the road. At first, he thought it belonged to a hiker or fisherman, but after 2 days of it not moving, he hiked down to investigate. The van was Emily's. It sat crooked on the uneven dirt, tires half sunk into the sand. A thick layer of dust clung to the windshield, and a crowbar lay on the ground nearby, oddly out of place. The ranger called it in immediately. When investigators arrived, they found the van unlocked. Inside, Emily's belongings were eerily untouched. Her backpack leaned against the front seat, her journal open on the dashboard with a pen still wedged between the pages. The last entry was dated the same day she had sent the text to her sister. Feeling watched, it read, "Don't know if it's real or my imagination running wild. I'm sleeping with the lights on tonight." There were no clear signs of struggle. No blood, no overturned furniture, no broken windows. Her phone was missing. Her wallet was still there, with all her cash and cards. Authorities scoured the area and found a trail of footprints leading away from the van, some hers, based on shoe prints, others indeterminate. They trailed toward the river, then disappeared entirely into the mud and reeds of the Rio Grande's edge. Divers were called in, but the river was swollen from recent rains, currents strong and visibility near zero. They found nothing. No body. No clothes. No answers. Media caught wind of the discovery and ran wild with theories. Was she running from someone? Did she stage her own disappearance? Did she fall into the river and drown, or was someone else involved? Her family stood by helplessly as the news headlines turned Emily's story into speculation and myth. The van was towed and locked in an evidence lot. Her father visited it once. He sat inside, ran his hand over the worn leather seat, and whispered, "Where did you go, baby?" The case grew cold, and the desert kept its secrets. The seasons changed. The world moved on. But Emily Carter's name never stopped echoing through her family's home. Her room remained untouched, postcards pinned on the wall, maps marked with tiny stars, her books stacked neatly by the bed. Her mother, Linda, still set a place for her at the table during holidays. Her father, Tom, took early retirement from his job, dedicating himself to chasing every dead-end lead and rumor that surfaced online. Some nights, he sat in the dark garage with the TV muted, watching Emily's old vlogs over and over, pausing at her laughter, at the moments where her eyes flicked towards something just off-screen. As the years slipped by, the case faded from the media spotlight. New tragedies took its place. But for the Carter family, time didn't bring peace. Instead, it sharpened the ache, made the silence more unbearable. Linda began writing open letters to her daughter, posting them on a blog titled, "Still Waiting for Emily." Thousands followed. Some offered condolences. Others claimed to have seen her. None of the sightings were confirmed. The FBI's involvement waned. The official line was that she was presumed dead, likely lost to the river. But the lack of a body, the strange state of her van, the missing phone, and the cryptic final journal entries all continued to gnaw at those who couldn't let it go. Among them was Detective Hal Rivas, who had been among the first called to the van scene. Now retired, Hal couldn't stop thinking about the case. Something about it felt unfinished, unclean. He began reviewing the files at home in his spare time, comparing them to similar disappearances along the Southwest Corridor. Patterns emerged, subtle ones. Other travelers, mostly women, vanishing near isolated desert routes, some leaving behind abandoned vehicles, journals, or phones that suddenly stopped pinging. Meanwhile, strange reports trickled in from hikers and river guides who frequented the area near where Emily's van had been found. Several claimed they'd seen a barefoot woman standing near the edge of the river at dusk. Sometimes she appeared dazed, unmoving, then would vanish back into the brush. One kayaker swore he'd heard a woman's voice whisper his name from the shore, though no one was there. Locals began referring to her as La Desaparecida, the vanished one. Online forums picked up the stories, breathing new life into Emily's case. Amateur sleuths dissected every vlog she had ever made, looking for hidden messages or background anomalies. They questioned everything: who she'd spoken to, the man at the gas station, the footage from her last days. A subreddit dedicated to her disappearance gained thousands of members, some of whom traveled to New Mexico to retrace her path. Yet, nothing solid emerged. Only whispers. Footprints washed away by time. Ghost stories. 6 years passed. Her family, though exhausted, refused to declare her dead. She's not gone, Linda would say to anyone who dared suggest it. She's just not found yet. Then, in the 7th spring since Emily vanished, the Rio Grande flooded after heavy rains, swelling its banks and pulling debris from its muddy bottom. And what the water gave back would reignite the case with a fury. The Rio Grande had risen with the force of a restless memory. That spring, storms battered the southwest for days, flash floods sweeping through dry valleys, spilling into rivers long starved for rain. The water turned a deep brown, churning with debris and fragments of the forgotten. Trees along the bank groaned under the weight of the current, roots exposed and clutching desperately to the muddy earth. It was near one of those uprooted trees, on a quiet stretch of riverbank rarely visited by anyone but locals, that a weathered fisherman named Joel Salgado made a discovery that would shake the silence of 6 long years. Joel had been casting lines from the same bend in the river since he was a boy. He knew the flow, the sounds, the moods of the current. That morning, as the water receded slightly, he noticed something snagged in the thick roots of a downed cottonwood tree, something black and rectangular, glinting faintly in the sun. Wading carefully, Joel tugged it free, a half-rotted, algae-stained backpack, tightly zipped and sealed with a corroded carabiner. It had clearly been in the water a long time. Inside, waterlogged contents sloshed as he lifted it. Thinking it might belong to a lost hiker, he brought it ashore and began to sift through the contents under the growing light. There wasn't much left intact, most papers had dissolved into sludge. But buried in the bottom, wrapped in a cracked plastic case, was a small GoPro camera. The lens was fogged and scratched. Joel brought it home, wiped it off, and showed it to his nephew, who recognized the brand and carefully pried the SD card out. They contacted the sheriff's department, who took the camera into evidence. Forensic techs worked quickly once they realized the initials, EC, were faintly etched on the battery cover. Within 24 hours, the memory card was dried, cleaned, and examined. Against all odds, the footage was recoverable. The Carter family was notified immediately. Linda collapsed in her living room when the sheriff confirmed the backpack likely belonged to Emily. Tom sat at the kitchen table in silence, unable to speak. The footage, its mere existence, meant their daughter had lived beyond that last text. She'd kept recording, and somewhere inside that card were her final moments, her last thoughts, her truth. Law enforcement released no public details at first. But whispers spread fast. The GoPro held over an hour of footage. Some clear, some distorted. Most of it filmed in the days after her last known sighting. None of it easy to watch. Within days, the case that had gone cold was burning hot again. Media swarmed the small town. Online communities exploded with speculation. And somewhere, someone who thought Emily Carter had been forgotten now knew they were wrong. The recovered footage began innocently enough. Sunlight through a dusty van window, Emily's face dappled with shadows from swaying desert trees. She looked tired but still composed, still speaking to the camera in the soft, intentional way her vlog followers knew so well. "It's day, I don't even know," she said with a nervous laugh. "I haven't had service in a while. I think I took a wrong turn somewhere near Sierra Blanca. But I'm okay." The next few clips were scattered across hours, maybe even days. Emily documented her efforts to hike to higher ground to find a signal. Her voice, once confident, grew quieter. "I keep hearing something at night. Like footsteps around the van. I thought it was coyotes, but I don't know. Something doesn't feel right out here." In one shaky video, she filmed from inside the van at night. Only the dim glow of a lantern lit her face. Outside, there was movement, shadows shifting just beyond the frosted windows. She whispered into the camera, "If anything happens to me, I need you to know I wasn't trying to disappear. Someone is out there, watching." The footage cut sharply, then returned with a blurred recording. Emily's camera swung wildly as she ran through thick brush, breathing hard, branches slapping against her arms. In the corner of the screen, just for a second, a figure appeared, too far away to identify. Tall, still, unmoving. In another clip, filmed during daylight, she sat on a boulder by the riverbank, dirty and shaken. "I walked for hours today. I think I've gone in circles. The river's louder than I remember. I found boot prints. Not mine. They were fresh." Her voice cracked. "They're not just following me. They're playing with me. Then came the most chilling segment of all. It was dusk. Emily sat inside what looked like a makeshift shelter, branches and tarps leaned against a rock wall. Her face was pale, streaked with dirt. She looked into the lens, eyes red. If you're watching this, I need you to tell my mom and dad I didn't stop fighting. I tried to stay alive. But I think they're close now. She paused, lips trembling. In the silence, a voice echoed faintly behind her. A man's voice, calling her name, Emily. She froze. Tears spilled silently as she reached for the camera, but before it cut off, there was a final whisper, one not spoken to the camera, but to herself. I shouldn't have ignored the gas station. I shouldn't have laughed. The video ended in static. Investigators who reviewed the footage described it as deeply disturbing and unlike anything we've seen before. Specialists enhanced the audio and video frame by frame. The voice in the background didn't match anyone in the missing persons database. No match, no leads, no arrest. But now they knew, Emily had not drowned. She had run. She had survived, for a time. And someone had been hunting her. The footage reignited the case with fury. Media demanded answers, online forums exploded with theories, and somewhere, out there in the desert or beyond, the person in that video may have realized, their secret wasn't buried after all. The grainy footage had offered one critical clue, a background detail most would have missed. In one frame, barely visible through the blur and chaos, was a rock formation. Unique, jagged, almost like a crown jutting up from the earth. A geologist from a nearby university happened to be watching the footage online and recognized the terrain. It was a remote section of the lower Rio Grande Valley, tucked far off any official trail. When he notified the authorities, a fresh search was immediately deployed. It took 2 days of grueling travel by foot and drone before a team of state investigators and search and rescue volunteers located it, a narrow ravine flanked by overgrown brush, treacherous with loose stone and gnarled roots. There, hidden behind a curtain of desert scrub and thick mesquite trees, was a structure no one had expected, a crude shack, built low into the side of the valley, almost invisible unless you were standing right on top of it. The door was little more than a sheet of warped plywood, bound with wire and covered in scratch marks. Inside, the air was sour and heavy, as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. The interior was dark, the only light coming through slats in the walls. Dust floated in the beams like ash. What they found inside turned the reopened case into something far more sinister. There was a mattress, thin and sunken, covered in a dirty wool blanket. Rusted cans of food lined a makeshift shelf, along with 2 half-burnt candles, a cracked mirror, and a stack of torn clothing. On the far wall, tacked with bent nails, were photographs, faded by sun and moisture. Some were of landscapes, others were of women. All of them seemed to be screenshots taken from various YouTube videos or blogs. And among them, pinned dead center, was a printed photo of Emily. Her face was crossed out in red marker, and X carved through the paper. In a corner was a leather-bound notebook, much older than Emily's. Inside were disturbing, erratic entries written in blocky handwriting. Rants about cleansing the watchers, and references to the ones who tell too much. Some pages had dates. One matched the exact day Emily's last text was sent. But still, there was no sign of her body. No bones. No clothing traceable to her, aside from one torn strip of flannel, the same pattern as the shirt she wore in her final video. DNA tests later confirmed it had been hers. She had been here. She may have hidden in this very shack, or been held in it. Authorities widened their search around the ravine, using cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, and aerial surveys. Nothing further turned up. The shack became the epicenter of public fascination and fear. Media dubbed it the Valley Room. Online sleuths pored over satellite imagery, trying to find similar locations. Local law enforcement received tips from nearby towns, stories of a recluse seen trading at supply stores years ago, of a drifter who lived near the river and vanished right around the time Emily disappeared. But no suspect was identified. No fingerprints, no ID. Whoever had built the shack had erased themselves well. The discovery cast a long shadow. It was no longer just a disappearance, it was now a confirmed encounter with something, or someone, far darker than anyone had imagined. Emily hadn't wandered off. She hadn't fled from nothing. She had been hunted, and cornered. And still, after all the digging and searching, One question remained. If she had been there, then where was she now? The morning of the press conference was overcast, as if the sky itself were holding its breath. Outside the county sheriff's office in El Paso, reporters gathered behind metal barricades, cameras fixed on the podium. Microphones jutted forward like weapons, aimed at a grief-stricken mother who had waited 6 long years for even the smallest piece of truth. Lynda Carter stood in front of them, her back straight despite the weight she carried, a small velvet box clutched tightly in her trembling hands. Inside the box was Emily's necklace, found at the site near the shack, tangled in a root just outside the entrance. It was unmistakable, a tiny compass charm, worn and tarnished, the same one she had worn in every vlog. It was the last physical item recovered that could be directly tied to her. No body had been found. No confirmed sighting. But in that necklace, the public saw what the Carters already knew deep down. Emily had been taken somewhere dark, and had likely never walked away. Lynda's voice cracked as she began. 6 years ago, our daughter Emily left home with a dream to document the stories of people across America. She believed in beauty. She believed in truth. And she believed she was strong enough to see the country on her own. And she was. But someone, something, found her out there. And now, we are left with what little the river has returned. Tom stood beside her, jaw clenched, holding Lynda's hand. They didn't speak much these days. Grief had carved different paths for them. Lynda turned to advocacy, launching a foundation for missing women. Tom isolated himself, diving deeper into maps, reports, coordinates. But today, they stood as one. Behind them, the sheriff took over, confirming what many had suspected. Foul play was now officially recognized. The shack was being treated as a crime scene. DNA testing had identified at least 3 female contributors within it, only one matched Emily. The others remained unknown. The case had grown. As the cameras rolled, a reporter shouted, "Do you believe she's still alive?" Lynda didn't answer at first. Her eyes wandered to the clouds. Then, softly, she said, "I believe she fought. I believe she survived longer than any of us knew. And I believe, wherever she is, her story isn't finished." In the weeks that followed, the area near the shack was closed to the public. Yet, strange sightings increased. Campers swore they saw a woman standing across the river, barefoot, her hair matted, clothes tattered, watching silently from the trees. Once, a drone operator captured footage of what appeared to be a figure darting into the brush just before sunset. The clip went viral, reigniting theories. Emily was alive. Emily had escaped. Emily had become something else entirely. Online forums spun tales of a ghost of the Rio Grande, a woman who wandered the edge of the river at night, helping lost hikers, warning them away from the shadows. Skeptics called it hysteria, but those who'd been near the ravine spoke differently. They said the air there was heavy. That at night, you could hear breathing when no one else was around. That sometimes, a whisper came with the wind, "Tell them I tried to run." Emily Carter's face, once smiling across thumbnails and travel vlogs, now appeared in true crime documentaries and digital memorials. But to her family, she wasn't just a mystery to solve. She was a daughter, a sister, a voice that still echoed in their dreams. And somewhere, deep in the valley where the river bent sharply into shadow, a secret still lingered, buried beneath time, branches, and silence. Waiting.